22 years ago, a 36-year-old woman vanished on her way to meet friends in San Francisco, disappearing without a trace, leaving her family in panic and despair. Authorities suspected her ex-boyfriend and a few acquaintances were involved, but with no body found and few clues to pursue, the investigation eventually stalled. Yet, for nearly 2 decades, an elderly mother never gave up hope, clinging to the faint belief that her daughter was still out there somewhere. Then one day, when workers were digging near Golden Gate Park, they uncovered a detail that shocked the city and reopened the case. Before diving into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. On the night of June 14, 2003, San Francisco entered summer with a sultry yet vibrant atmosphere. Every street in the Mission District glowing with flickering neon lights from bars, restaurants, and late-night eateries. The daytime heat still lingered on the paved streets, mingling with the smell of exhaust, tacos from food carts, and the chatter in multiple languages, turning the neighborhood into a vivid, colorful tapestry. Walls covered in graffiti, old apartments with narrow balconies overlooking bustling streets, formed a familiar backdrop for thousands of residents and tourists enjoying a lively weekend evening. Amid this noisy scene, Melissa Carter, 36, an accountant living alone in a small second-floor apartment in a red brick building, locked her door and left at 8:30 p.m. She wore a neat light blue dress, a thin cardigan to ward off the sudden chill from the San Francisco Bay, and carried a leather purse and an old Nokia phone. Known among her friends for her punctuality, rarely late and often arriving early to help set up, that night Melissa left home later than usual, her face pensive. She descended the creaky iron staircase with dry metallic clangs and blended into the crowded flow on Mission Street. At a small bar on Valencia Street, her friends were already there, cocktails ordered, music filling the air, their eyes glancing toward the entrance, expecting Melissa as usual. They believed she'd show up, smiling, ready to raise a glass like always. But 9 p.m. passed, and their table remained one person short. The first calls were made, ringing a few times before going silent. By 9:30, the signal was gone. Melissa's phone was completely off. In a city that never sleeps, where sounds and lights flow endlessly, her sudden disappearance left a chilling void, like a dark crack opening amid the honking cars under red and green lights. The lively chatter from sidewalk crowds and music spilling from second-story windows. A woman left her small apartment to attend a birthday party, but never arrived, and no one heard her voice or saw her familiar figure again. Her friends began to feel worry creeping in. Her family far away grew anxious when they couldn't reach her, and the Mission District, still brightly lit and noisy as ever, had unknowingly swallowed a soul. That unnatural silence became a haunting obsession, the start of a chilling story where fear and tension spread in the days that followed. The next morning, as the first sunlight hit the old tiled roofs of the Mission District, the Carter family began to panic in earnest. Linda Carter, Melissa's mother, sat at the kitchen table in her suburban Daly City home, her trembling hands clutching the landline phone, dialing her daughter's number repeatedly, but hearing only the dead tone of a switched-off phone. She was used to Melissa calling every Sunday morning to check in, but this morning, the silence on the other end was suffocating. David Carter, Melissa's brother, raced to her small apartment in the Mission District. The familiar road felt alien as one question looped in his mind. Where was his sister? Standing outside her apartment, he found everything frozen, as if time had stopped since the night before. The door was locked, the mailbox stuffed, and Melissa's car sat untouched on the street. He knocked, called her name loudly, but only cold silence echoed back in the narrow hallway. A heavy premonition hit him, forcing him to call his mother. Within an hour, mother and son were at the San Francisco Police Department, filing a report. Inside the dimly lit duty room, fluorescent lights cast a gloomy atmosphere. Linda, trembling, placed a photo of her daughter on the desk, her eyes red as she said, "My daughter went missing last night. She went out to meet friends but never arrived. Her phone's off. No one can reach her." The duty officer, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, glanced at the photo and jotted down a few lines. He sighed and said in a monotone, "She might have just gone somewhere for a while." Adults have the right to disappear. Those careless words struck Linda's heart like a blow. She sat frozen, lips trembling, unable to speak. David stood beside her, his body tense. Swallowing his anger, he kept his voice steady, but each word came out sharp. My sister would never just leave. She's never missed an appointment, never worried anyone. If Melissa said she'd be there, she'd be there. He explained that Melissa had plans with friends on Valencia Street, and all her friends confirmed her disappearance was highly unusual. One friend said over the phone, Melissa always arrives early. If she didn't show up, something happened. But these statements were only noted cursorily, failing to shake the police's indifference. The officer shrugged, promised to monitor the situation, and moved on to another stack of files. Linda sat there, tears blurring her eyes, feeling the world turn its back on her. She knew her daughter, and she knew Melissa didn't vanish willingly. Disappointment mixed with anger left her choking, but her eyes still held resolve. She turned to David, her voice hoarse. If they won't look, we'll find her ourselves. David nodded, gripping his mother's hand tightly. He understood that from this moment, they weren't just facing the fear of losing a loved one, but also the indifference of a system meant to protect them. As they left the station, the midday sun blazed, but it couldn't dispel the cold seeping into their hearts. The city outside remained noisy, horns, music, laughter, but for the Carter family, it was all drowned out by an invisible darkness. They walked heavily, carrying the sense that their search for Melissa was just beginning, and they'd have to carry it almost alone, amid the apathy of an entire investigative system. A week passed since Melissa Carter vanished, and while San Francisco spun on in its daily rhythm, for the Carter family, every hour was a knife cutting deeper into their despair. With the police showing no urgency, David Carter and Melissa's friends launched their own search campaign. On Saturday morning, they gathered at a small cafe at the corner of 24th Street, the table littered with stacks of missing person posters in bold red letters. Have you seen Melissa Carter? Below was a photo of Melissa in work attire, her face bright with a gentle smile. Linda Carter sat quietly in a corner, her sunken eyes reflecting sleepless nights, watching the stacked flyers with a mix of hope and anguish. When the clock struck 9, the group of volunteers, friends, neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers moved by the story fanned out in all directions. Mission District, Bernal Heights, and beyond. The posters quickly appeared on utility poles, bus stops, grocery store doors, school bulletin boards, and even the graffiti-covered walls of Mission. Melissa's image became part of the urban landscape, her face looking down on the bustling crowds, a reminder that someone had vanished in the heart of this crowded city. That afternoon, the search group organized a sweep of Dolores Park. The place was packed with people on picnic blankets, playing music and laughing, as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet amid the lively scene, small groups with flyers in hand circled around, asking anyone who might have seen Melissa on the night of June 14th. A few vaguely recalled seeing a woman in a blue dress passing by, but the details were hazy, and no one was certain. As the sun set, the volunteers patiently combed every lawn and path, but all leads ended in emptiness. The next day, the campaign expanded to bus terminals and BART stations. Posters plastered every notice board, Melissa's face beside urgent pleading text. Another group went to the Golden Gate Bridge, infamous for its tragic stories. They showed Melissa's photo to patrol officers, asking if anyone had reported seeing a woman matching her description. The answers were shakes of the head, though some officers' eyes softened, as if understanding the despair the Carter family was enduring. The media began to take notice. Short news segments aired on local stations. A 36-year-old accountant vanished on her way to a birthday party on Valencia Street. Cameras captured David holding a poster, his voice trembling but resolute. We won't give up. If anyone knows anything, please come forward. The plea echoed on TV screens, but behind it was the weathered face of a man clinging to the last threads of hope. Under public pressure, the San Francisco Police Department joined the search officially. A team was sent to review surveillance cameras around Mission and Bernal Heights, but the blurry 2003 footage offered little help. They also re-interviewed witnesses from Valencia Street that night. A bartender recalled seeing a woman resembling Melissa standing at the corner of the bar, talking to a man, but couldn't remember his face. The vague lead was noted in the report. Each day of searching kept faint hope alive, but anxiety grew. Linda Carter held her daughter's photo, standing in Dolores Park, her eyes scanning aimlessly, as if Melissa might suddenly appear in the crowd. All she got was the breeze through the grass and distant laughter. Melissa's friends, used to her smile and punctuality, could only put up more posters, hand out more flyers, and pray for a call with news. A week later, San Francisco remained noisy, but for the Carter family and those who loved Melissa, the noise only deepened their emptiness. They tried to fill the void with posters, searches, and interviews, but the outcome remained terrifyingly unclear. Hope lingered faintly, but fear began to plant a dreadful thought. Melissa might never return. 2 weeks after Melissa Carter's disappearance, the missing person posters had faded under San Francisco's harsh sun and fog, but the anxiety in her family and friends' hearts grew darker. The urgent search yielded no clear results, and public pressure forced the police to shift focus, questioning those close to Melissa. The first name on the list was Michael Torres, her ex-boyfriend. Michael, 39, a freelance IT technician, lived in a small apartment near South of Market. Their relationship had ended shortly before her disappearance. Friends said they often clashed over Michael's jealousy and controlling nature. When summoned to the police station, Michael wore an old t-shirt, his face tired but composed. He claimed that on the night of June 14th, he was home alone watching a basketball game on TV. When asked to specify the game or channel, he hesitated before answering, making his alibi shaky. No one could confirm he was home when Melissa vanished. An internal police note read, "Weak alibi requires further monitoring." Beyond Michael, the police questioned those who interacted with Melissa daily. At her accounting firm, co-workers said she seemed stressed lately, often stepping out for private calls. A female colleague recalled that 3 days before vanishing, Melissa whispered that someone kept following her, but brushed it off with a laugh, offering no details. The police noted this, but the someone remained unknown. Neighbors in her Mission District apartment were also questioned. A woman living downstairs said that around 9 p.m. on June 14th, she heard arguing outside near the Market Street intersection. Peering out her window, she saw a woman in a blue dress arguing heatedly with a tall, broad man. Though not certain, she thought the woman resembled Melissa. Another witness, a street vendor, reported seeing a couple arguing near a bus stop on Market Street, but dim lighting and the crowd obscured the man's face. These accounts intensified the already heavy atmosphere. The Carter family was devastated by the news. Linda clutched her daughter's photo, sobbing, "If she was really arguing with someone that night, why didn't anyone help her?" The Mission District buzzed with rumors. Some speculated Melissa had a secret enemy. Others pointed at her ex-boyfriend. Stories spread from cafes to streetcars, casting a cloud of suspicion over the neighborhood. The media jumped on the story, with headlines like "Woman Vanishes After Mysterious Argument on Market Street" or "Ex-Boyfriend Suspected in Carter Disappearance." Michael, learning he was named in the media, angrily denied involvement, claiming the police and press were scapegoating him. But gaps in his alibi fueled public suspicion. David Carter, in an interview, said bluntly, "We don't want to accuse anyone without proof, but we want the truth. Someone knows what happened that night." Meanwhile, the police dug into Melissa's other relationships. A male coworker who joined her for lunch a few times was questioned, but had an alibi backed by cafe cameras. Another neighbor, a recent move-in, knew little about Melissa. Still, rumors and theories multiplied, like cracks spreading across fragile glass. The spontaneous searches began to dwindle, but one morning, the police called David Carter, reporting they had found an item possibly linked to the case. In a narrow alley in the Mission District, where walls were covered in graffiti and trash was strewn about, a sanitation worker spotted a black purse mixed among old cardboard boxes. When opened, it contained Melissa's leather wallet, her accounting firm ID, and some personal documents. The cash was gone, but what stunned everyone was the presence of these all too familiar items, undeniable proof that Melissa had been intercepted shortly after leaving her apartment that night. The police sealed off the area, photographed the scene, and collected trace evidence. In the lab, technicians dusted for prints, and found multiple fingerprints on the wallet and purse strap. Most matched Melissa's, but some clearly belonged to someone else. Tension mounted as the fingerprints were entered into the National AFES database. The Carter family held their breath. But the results came back cold. No matches. The prints belonged to someone never arrested, never documented, an anonymous shadow. Linda Carter nearly collapsed upon hearing the news. She had hoped this would be a breakthrough, but now they faced a bitter truth. They had evidence Melissa had fallen into someone else's hands, but no idea who. Worse than no leads, David said, is having leads that go nowhere. Local media covered the story, emphasizing the mystery of the unknown fingerprints. Mission District residents read the reports with chills, wondering if the culprit was someone they passed daily on the street, on a streetcar, or in a morning cafe. The police continued canvassing the alley area, interviewing nearby residents and workers. A grocery store owner recalled seeing trash bags disturbed days earlier, but didn't notice who passed by. A homeless youth vaguely mentioned a man tossing something into the alley at midnight, but the description was too hazy to sketch a suspect. The lead hit another dead end. In press conferences, the SFPD spokesperson maintained a monotone, "We are continuing the investigation, and all theories are being considered." But behind the bureaucratic words, the community sensed the impasse. In July's nights, Linda Carter sat alone by her window, clutching her daughter's photo, her eyes blankly staring at the street. Each time a police siren echoed, she startled, thinking there might be news, but the next morning, it was the same cycle, waiting and disappointment. In everyone's minds, the image of Melissa's purse lying in a filthy alley became a cruel symbol. She had been swept into darkness in the most familiar place. And when the mysterious fingerprints yielded no answers, the already stifling atmosphere grew heavier. San Francisco, the vibrant city that never sleeps, seemed to hide a chilling secret beneath its bustling surface. For the Carter family, the purse was not just their only fragile clue, but a brutal reminder that Melissa had been taken from them and might never return. By late 2003, as winter draped San Francisco's hills in thick, cold fog, Melissa Carter's disappearance had reached a dead end.
After the purse was found in the Mission Alley,
The police uncovered no further evidence to crack the case. Hours of interrogations, thick reports, even the unknown fingerprints on the purse strap, all remained scattered pieces that couldn't form a complete picture. Within the SFPD, investigators began admitting what the Carter family feared most. The case was slipping into the dark realm of forgotten files. In December, an official document was signed. Melissa Carter's case was classified as a cold case. The news was a final blow to Linda Carter's heart. She read and reread the cold line on the paper. No further leads. Active investigation suspended. In her small Daly City living room, she sat motionless for hours, Melissa's photo on the table like an unyielding gaze. David Carter, trying to stay strong for his mother, would sit alone in his car at night, gripping the steering wheel until his hands went numb. He couldn't accept that all their search efforts ended in two words: cold case. In Melissa's Mission District apartment, everything remained untouched. The bed still had its light blue sheets, the desk held half-open accounting notebooks, and the kitchen counter kept her salt and pepper shakers. Linda visited every weekend, dusting the table, straightening photo frames, as if Melissa had just left and might return any moment. She hung a new calendar on the wall, marking each day like a ritual clinging to hope. But each day passed, lonelier and heavier. The media stopped reporting. News outlets moved to other stories, other names, leaving Melissa's disappearance in small lines at the bottom of columns. In the Mission community, the chatter faded. People grew used to seeing Melissa's faded posters on utility poles, weathered by rain and wind, blending into the scenery. Only the Carter family held on to the pain, refusing to believe their daughter and sister existed only in memory. That Christmas came quietly. Linda placed an empty chair at the dinner table for Melissa, draping it with a red cloth. A candle flickered, casting light on her haggard face. David stared at the empty chair, feeling choked, as if the room echoed with heavy silence. They still waited for a knock, a call, any sign that Melissa was out there. But that night, like so many others, only cold bay winds whistled through the door cracks. As the clock ticked into 2004, Melissa Carter's case file was stored in a cold metal cabinet in the SFPD's archives. For the police, it was a closed document. But for the Carter family, it was an unhealed wound, an open room, a dream teetering between hope and despair. In their hearts, the emptiness gnawed daily as they clung to a fragile belief. Somehow, the truth would find its way back. In August 2022, San Francisco was cloaked in its familiar thick fog. But that morning, the city was jolted by news that revived memories thought buried for nearly 2 decades. At a construction site for an underground parking lot near the eastern edge of Golden Gate Park, workers operating an excavator stumbled on something unusual in the deep soil. At first, they thought it was rotten wood or long-buried trash. But when the iron bucket unearthed a clump of earth mixed with small white fragments, a worker bent down, picked one up, and froze. It was human bone. The site supervisor was alerted, and within minutes, the San Francisco police arrived, sealing off the area. Yellow tape blocked entrances, patrol cars flashed red and blue, and forensic team members in windbreakers quietly entered. As news leaked, reporters from local outlets swarmed the site. Cameras, microphones, and long lenses focused on the construction area, where soil was now being hand-dug under strict supervision. Some workers, still shaken, gathered and told the press they saw an entire small skeleton in the dirt, like it had been there for years. Within hours, headlines blared, "Human remains found near Golden Gate Park." Those bold words instantly recalled a name long forgotten for many, Melissa Carter. The San Francisco Police Department held a press conference that afternoon. The spokesperson said they couldn't yet confirm the identity, but had reason to believe this could be linked to an old missing persons case. The vague statement sent public interest to a fever pitch. In the Mission District, where faded posters once lined the streets, residents whispered, "Could it be her?" Evening news replayed images of the cordoned-off site, interspersed with hesitant interviews from locals haunted by Melissa's name. In their Daly City home, Linda Carter trembled at the news. She gripped her son's hand, her eyes teary, torn between hope and fear. "If it's Melissa, at least we'll have answers," she whispered. David stayed silent, his gaze dark. He knew that confirmation would extinguish the faint hope his sister was still alive. In the following days, the site became the city's focal point. Forensic experts patiently collected bone fragments, decayed fabric, and rusted buttons. Each was sealed in numbered bags and sent to the lab. Every step was meticulous, as if each speck of dust could hold a secret from nearly 2 decades ago. News channels described the scene's atmosphere as tense to the point of suffocation. The police revealed no details, but fleeting images of partial skeletons and faded blue fabric were enough to stir suspense and old pain for those who'd followed the case. Across San Francisco, from Bernal Heights cafes to Ferry Plaza farmers markets, people buzzed with talk. Some thought the remains were just another anonymous death in a city with many mysteries, but most believed fate was unveiling a long-hidden truth. For them, Melissa Carter's name had never fully faded, only waited to be spoken again. The Carter family endured the longest days of their lives. Linda prayed nightly, hoping her daughter was finally found, even if only as bones. David stayed up, scouring news reports, rewatching live footage from the site, searching for any sign of his sister through camera lenses. They, and the community, awaited the forensic lab's answer, an answer that could close 2 decades of waiting, but also snuff out their last hope. San Francisco remained noisy as ever, but in those August days, an invisible tension hung over the city. Amid streetcar horns and bar music, people glanced nervously toward Golden Gate Park, where the deep soil was slowly yielding its secret. A secret that could shift a case, thought lost to oblivion. Days after the remains were found near Golden Gate Park, the site remained the city's focus, but for the Carter family, only one question mattered: were these Melissa's remains? On August 17, 2022, bone and teeth samples were sent to the SFPD's forensic lab. In a cold, bright room, under microscopes and the skilled hands of technicians, each bone was cleaned, sorted, and sampled for DNA. The teeth, fortunately preserving pulp, were carefully drilled to extract genetic material. The process took hours, requiring absolute precision, as a single error could ruin the results. When the DNA sample was coded and sealed, it was entered into CODIS, the federal DNA database, the last hope for many families of the missing. For comparison, the police contacted the Carter family. Linda, now 87, gave a blood sample. Her hands shook as the nurse inserted the needle, not from physical pain, but from knowing each drop would determine the truth. She'd waited nearly 2 decades for. David, now 50, also provided a blood sample. He held his mother's hand tightly, as if passing her fragile strength in this precarious moment. They left the hospital in silence, both knowing the wait for results would be the longest of their lives. In the lab, DNA analyzers hummed, running millions of micro-comparisons. Each genetic sequence was extracted, coded, and entered. Technicians watched blinking screens as data emerged. They compared the remains sample with Linda and David's profiles. Then, a notification flashed, match found, maternal lineage. The results were conclusive. There was no doubt, the remains found under the soil near Golden Gate Park were Melissa Carter's, the woman who vanished on June 14, 2003. When police knocked on the Carter home to deliver the news, Linda sat motionless, her eyes blank as the officer read the results. Everything around her blurred, only one sentence echoing, "We've confirmed the identity. It's Melissa." She broke down, not in a flood of tears, but in hoarse, choked sobs after 2 decades of carrying hope. David hugged her tightly, but he couldn't hold back his own tears. He thought he'd prepared for this day, but when the truth hit, the pain overwhelmed every defense. The news spread across San Francisco. TV ran special reports. 2003 cold case. Melissa Carter's body confirmed. Newspapers published side-by-side photos of Melissa's radiant past and the grim excavation site. Social media overflowed with grief and anger. "She's finally found, but why did it take 19 years?" one user wrote. In their small home, Linda placed Melissa's photo on an altar beside a white candle. She whispered, "I found you, Melissa, but the cost was too high." David stood silently at Melissa's bedroom door, still preserved from the day she vanished. He brushed the dusty desk, whispering as if to his sister, "At least we're not waiting in the dark anymore." Though painful, the truth had emerged, opening a new door. The missing person case was now officially a homicide. The Mission District community was stunned. Old neighbors, who'd seen posters plastered across streets, told reporters it felt like reliving those days. An elderly woman whispered through tears, "I always believed she'd come back. I was wrong, but at least we don't have to wonder anymore." San Francisco didn't sleep that night. Lights stayed on in newsrooms, police stations, and the Carter home. The city's atmosphere felt heavier, as if every street, every footstep, awaited one question's answer. If Melissa was found, who buried her in darkness for nearly 2 decades? After the DNA results confirmed the remains near Golden Gate Park were Melissa Carter's, the case was handed to the SFPD's cold case unit. A file gathering dust for nearly 2 decades was placed back on the table, carrying the weight of a family's long wait for justice. Leading the case was Detective Laura Wilson, a 38-year-old investigator who'd helped crack multiple stalled cases with new DNA technology. Holding the thick file labeled Melissa Carter, Missing Person, June 2003, she felt the city's past weighing on her shoulders. The first pages still bore the missing person poster, Melissa smiling in work attire. The red text faded. "Have you seen Melissa Carter?" Laura began by reviewing the old suspect list. The first name stood out, Michael Torres, the ex-boyfriend. A shaky alibi, inconsistent statements, and a tense relationship with the victim made him the prime target back then. But the file lacked physical evidence to tie him, and after months, the police had moved on. Laura underlined Michael's name in red, re-interview. She wanted to hear his story again, this time through 2022's lens, where DNA and digital data could illuminate overlooked details. Next were witness statements. Laura flipped to a report. A neighbor claimed that on June 14th, near the Market Street intersection, she saw a woman in a blue dress arguing with a tall, broad man. Another witness, a street vendor, reported a similar scene but couldn't recall the man's face. Laura added a note, possible last sighting, cross-check. She wondered, Was that man Michael, or someone never mentioned? Reviewing evidence logs, Laura focused on the purse found in July 2003. The report noted, unknown fingerprints, no AFIS match. Back then, database technology was limited, and national records weren't as comprehensive. Laura requested a reanalysis of the prints using the 2022 AFIS system, with a database exponentially larger. Though results were pending, she believed technological advances could open new paths. Laura spent hours rereading interviews with Melissa's friends and coworkers. One small detail stopped her days before vanishing. Melissa told a colleague, someone kept following her. The comment was dismissed then, for lack of evidence. But now, with the remains confirming murder, it became critical. Laura wrote in her case log, confirm, Melissa may have been stalked before vanishing. In the cold case unit's chilly office, Laura spread old documents across the table. Black and white photos, faded reports, and crime scene maps lay like scattered puzzle pieces. She pinned them to a board, attaching witness and suspect photos with arrows and notes. Slowly, a picture formed. Melissa left home at 8:30 p.m., possibly met a man on Market Street, argued, then vanished. Her purse was discarded in a Mission Alley, and her body was found nearly 2 decades later in Golden Gate Park. The timeline had gaps, but for Laura, each piece was a promise that the truth was still there, waiting to be connected. The Carter family was called in for a progress report. Linda sat silently, her frail hands clasped, while David listened intently as Laura outlined the plan: re-interview old suspects, seek new witnesses, and cross-check DNA and fingerprints with modern tech. "We won't stop until we find who did this," Laura said firmly. In that moment, Linda saw in the detective's eyes a resolve unlike the SFPD's past indifference. She nodded, teary, "Please bring my daughter justice." As night fell, the cold case unit's office stayed lit. Laura sat alone before the case board, her eyes fixed on the lingering question marks. She knew this case wasn't just professional duty, but a chance to restore justice lost for nearly 2 decades. With each page turned, each old clue revived, a new journey had truly begun. While Detective Laura Wilson dug into the old file, the SFPD's forensic lab began detailed analysis of the newly excavated remains. Numbered, sealed bags containing bones, teeth, and clothing fragments sat on cold stainless steel tables, processed under strict protocols. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Harold Green, with over 20 years of autopsy experience, personally oversaw the work. He knew a single small discovery could shift the entire course of a case dormant for nearly 2 decades. The process began with reassembling the skeleton. Each bone was pieced together like a grim puzzle, forming the frame of an adult woman. Under the fluorescent lights, the truth emerged. Melissa Carter did not die quietly. The third and fourth ribs on the right side bore sharp fractures, not from soil pressure, but from direct forceful impact. The sternum showed signs of cracking, indicating a powerful blow or collision before death. Most chilling, another rib fragment clearly bore cut marks, a knife's clean, cold trace on bone. Harold concluded in his report, "The cause of death cannot be accidental. This is a homicide with direct violent force." While the forensic team analyzed the bones, another group processed the remaining fingernail fragments. Under a microscope, they found DNA preserved within the keratin. After extraction, the results silenced the room. Male DNA, unidentified, was mixed with Melissa's under her nails. There was only one explanation: she had fought back, desperately struggling with her attacker, and in her final moments, clenched her fists, leaving evidence of him. When the report reached Laura Wilson, she sat silently, reading each line, her brows furrowed. The forensic findings erased any lingering doubt. This was no mere disappearance, no sudden accident. Melissa Carter had been brutally murdered. Laura pictured the moment that woman fought, desperate until the end, carrying the case's most crucial evidence. A chill ran down her spine, but a resolute determination rose within her. Melissa fought to leave a clue. "My duty is to continue that fight." The Carter family was called in for a briefing. In a small meeting room, Dr. Harold explained concisely but clearly. Melissa was violently attacked, not an accident, and physical evidence of the perpetrator existed. Linda Carter sat still, her frail hands clenched together. Her tear-filled eyes gleamed with resolve. I always knew she didn't leave on her own. She wasn't that kind of person. David sat beside her, his jaw tight, eyes red with rage. The news was both a fresh wound and confirmation of the gut feeling they'd carried for nearly 2 decades. The media erupted. Newspapers that had once forgotten the case now splashed it on front pages. Melissa Carter didn't vanish. She was murdered. TV news interspersed Golden Gate Park footage with grave commentary, a shocking turn in a San Francisco cold case. The Mission District community, once covered in missing person posters, buzzed with horror. The killer might have lived among them all these years. In the cold case unit office, Laura pinned the forensic report to the board. Below Melissa's portrait, she wrote in red, "Homicide confirmed. Arrows connected the abandoned purse in the alley, witness accounts of the Market Street argument, and now the forensic results, each piece forming a deadly picture. But one critical piece remained, the unknown man's DNA." Laura knew that when this sample hit the system, it could be the final key to unlocking justice for Melissa. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and music from street-side bars, but in the cold case unit's small room, the air was thick. Young investigators stared at the caseboard, chilled by the thought of Melissa's desperate fight, leaving vivid evidence in her struggle. They understood this wasn't just an old case to solve, it was a chance to prove justice, though delayed, could still be served. Under the fluorescent lights, their silent vow echoed, Melissa's death would not be forgotten again. After the forensic lab confirmed the remains showed signs of murder, including male DNA under the victim's fingernails, all attention turned to the cold case unit's lab. This was the most critical piece, the one that could unveil the identity of the killer who took Melissa's life nearly 2 decades ago. Detective Laura Wilson sat before a specialized computer, watching technicians input data. A small vial containing DNA extracted from the keratin of Melissa's nails was fed into the analyzer, running through countless processes to produce an endless string of genetic data. For the first time in nearly 20 years, the nameless killer had left his most concrete trace himself in a desperate struggle. Instead of just entering it into CODIS as before, Laura directed the sample to a genetic genealogy system, a cutting-edge technology that had cracked dozens of cold cases across America. It didn't search for the killer directly, but for genetic relatives who'd voluntarily uploaded data to public gene sites. From there, investigators could build a family tree, narrowing down suspects. The process demanded patience and sharp intuition. The first days showed only unfamiliar names on the screen, distant relatives sharing faint genetic ties, 5th or 6th cousins. But bit by bit, the picture clarified. A technician pointed to a chart. Here's a woman in Texas sharing about 1.2% DNA, possibly a 3rd or 4th cousin. Another box appeared. A man in Arizona, about 3% match. Small, seemingly disconnected links were joined by genealogy software. Laura spent sleepless nights with the team, spreading family tree charts across the table. Names were connected by lines, relationships traced through birth, marriage, and death records. The tree grew from dozens to hundreds, then thousands of names. Finally, a key branch emerged, a long-standing family in Oakland, just a bridge away from San Francisco. The genetic links sharpened, pointing to one direction, Morales. In that family branch, many names appeared, siblings, distant cousins, descendants. But cross-referencing age and residence, in 2003, one stood out starkly, Anthony Morales, born 1975. Records showed he worked odd jobs in the Mission District in the early 2000s, specifically as a building maintenance worker, matching Melissa's apartment complex. And strangely, he abruptly left San Francisco right after the summer of 2003, moving to Oregon, then returning to the Bay Area in 2010. Laura stared at the name on the screen, her heart pounding. For nearly 20 years, Anthony Morales never appeared in any report, never a formal suspect. He was a faint shadow, slipping past the community and investigators' eyes. Now genetic technology had pulled that shadow into the light. On a December 2022 morning, the investigative team held a closed meeting. Laura presented the findings, from the genetic tree to Morales's background. The room fell silent as she concluded, "All leads point to one person, and he's still living in the Bay Area." The officers around the table exchanged tense glances. One spoke, "If it's him, he's been free, walking among us for 20 years. The Carter family was informed. Linda sat silently, eyes closed, hearing the name Anthony Morales. David clenched his fists, breathing heavily. They'd never heard of him, never imagined the killer could be an ordinary neighbor. So for all these years, he lived peacefully, while we suffered waiting. David whispered, voice choked. The media wasn't given details, but rumors leaked. News spoke of a breakthrough via DNA technology, of a suspect possibly in Oakland. Anticipation swept the city like a silent storm brewing. In the cold case unit office, Laura circled Anthony Morales in red on the case board, adding 2 words, primary suspect. Outside, San Francisco flowed with its hectic pace, but for those following the case, the air was heavier than ever. After nearly 20 years of darkness, a name had emerged from the shadows. With it, the truth of that summer night in 2003 was taking shape, tense, chilling, and undeniable. The file on Anthony Morales was opened, its old pages and electronic records leaving the cold case unit team stunned. The figure genetic genealogy pinpointed was no longer a meaningless name on a family tree, but a flesh-and-blood person who'd crossed Melissa Carter's life unnoticed. Morales, born 1975, grew up in a Mexican-American family in Oakland. He never stood out, with no criminal record drawing police attention in the 1990s, except a 1996 assault. At 21, Morales was arrested after a bar fight in Fruitvale, hitting a man with a glass bottle, requiring 12 stitches. The court went easy, issuing probation and community service, since Morales had no prior record and the victim didn't pursue further. But to Detective Laura Wilson, this detail was an early warning of a latent, violent streak. From 2000 to 2003, Morales worked maintenance at an old building on Valencia Street, ironically the same complex where Melissa lived. Payroll records showed he was often there evenings, fixing plumbing, electrical systems, or clearing hallway trash. Some former residents recalled Tony, a lanky maintenance guy, in a faded denim jacket, eyes always red as if sleep-deprived. They saw him as a poor laborer. No one suspected he could be the shadow lurking on June 14, 2003. Most haunting, Morales vanished from San Francisco right after Melissa's disappearance. He quit his job abruptly, leaving no contact information. Tax records showed he registered residency in Portland, Oregon, by late 2003, then moved multiple times. For 7 years, he was a ghost in the Bay Area, returning in 2010 as a construction worker in Hayward. This timing convinced Laura it wasn't coincidence. Innocent people don't flee, cutting ties with their old city right after a horrific murder. Cross-referencing residency and genetic data, the team realized Morales lived meters from Melissa's apartment, practically a familiar neighbor. Linda Carter, the victim's mother, could barely believe it. "I greeted him in the hallway," she whispered, eyes teary. David clenched his fists, growling. "He passed our door, heard Melissa laugh, and we had no idea." The betrayal of being hunted by a seemingly harmless neighbor deepened their pain. Morales's personal file revealed a shadowy life. Old friends described him as reserved, frequently moving, never holding jobs long. Former girlfriends reported obsessive jealousy, some saying he stalked them after breakups. Oakland police noted investigations into domestic violence, but none had enough evidence for charges. The 1996 assault, 2003 maintenance job, and mysterious disappearance afterward formed a single picture. He was always in the shadows, waiting to erupt. Laura meticulously noted details, marking matching timelines in red. 1996. Violence. 2003 at Melissa's building. June 2003. Melissa vanished. July 2003. Morales fled the city. No longer scattered notes. They formed a chillingly clear chain. Leaked SFPD internal reports shocked the community. Mission District residents were stunned to hear the suspect might be that maintenance guy. A woman from the same building told reporters, "I remember him leaning on the third-floor railing, smoking, watching the street. We never thought he was dangerous, just lonely." The truth sowed cold unease. The killer wasn't a distant monster, but someone you greeted daily, shared an elevator with, or saw fixing your hallway light. The big question lingered. What did Morales do while away from San Francisco? How many other shadows hid in his past? The Cold Case Unit began reviewing unsolved Oregon cases from 2003-2010, hoping for links. For now, his proximity to Melissa and flight after the crime made Morales the top suspect. Laura closed the file, her eyes dry but voice hoarse. We were so close to him for 20 years and didn't know. In the chilly room, silence fell. Only a chilling shock remained. The realization the killer might have been the neighbor passing your door, hearing your footsteps, and one day, vanished with your life. In the SFPD's interrogation room, white neon light bathed the cold metal table, with only 2 chairs facing each other. Anthony Morales sat back, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. Detective Laura Wilson placed a thick file on the table, the dry thud of paper on metal, heightening the room's tension. From the start, Morales insisted, I never knew anyone named Melissa Carter. I don't even know where she lived. His voice was firm, eyes cold, daring a challenge. But Laura didn't rush to counter, opening the file to an old employment contract from the Valencia Street Building Management Company, where Melissa lived. It listed Anthony Morales, contact details, and work dates from 2000 to mid-2003. You're sure you never lived in the Mission District? Laura asked, voice icy. Morales hesitated, then gave a thin smile. I just did odd jobs there, didn't live there. Laura nodded, producing a black and white photo of the building's front in 2002. In it, a lanky man in a faded denim jacket stood at the entrance, holding a trash bag. She slid it toward him. This is you, right? Morales glanced, lips tightening. Could be me. I don't remember clearly. His hands fidgeted, tapping the table, a sign Laura was waiting for. She presented another document, a statement from a former resident, describing Tony, the maintenance guy, often in the halls late at night. Morales fell silent, eyes darting away, then admitted, okay, I worked there, but I never talked to Melissa. Laura pressed. Odd because neighbors saw you and Melissa talking in the parking lot. Yet you claim you never met. Morales flushed, voice flustered. Maybe I mixed up names. I don't remember after all these years. His statements grew inconsistent, contradicting earlier claims. He denied everything, then admitted working at the building, only to waffle about not recalling the victim. Another officer, Sergeant Miller, interjected. You know Melissa vanished in June 2003, just weeks before you left San Francisco, without a trace. That's quite a coincidence, don't you think? Morales swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. I left for a new job. That's all. Laura stared, lowering her voice. No one believes it's coincidence when someone flees a city after a woman across the hall disappears, especially when unknown male DNA is found under her nails. And you know, we've compared it. The room froze. Morales's eyes darted, hands trembling, despite his efforts to hide it. I'm not involved. I didn't hurt her. You're framing me. But each piece of evidence, employment contract, neighbor statements, his departure timing, rendered his denials hollow. He stumbled in responses, sometimes repeating claims he'd just contradicted. The more he justified, the clearer his deception became. Laura didn't shout or slam the table. With patience and sharp evidence, she cornered Morales. By the end, he slumped, face in hands, silent for a long stretch. Not a confession, but the clearest sign his confident facade had cracked. In her case log, Laura wrote, inconsistent statements, erratic demeanor, clear tension. This is no longer a witness. This is the central suspect. Outside, the Carter family waited. They weren't given details, but seeing Morales leave, pale and unsteady, Linda gripped David's hand. He knows something. I see it in his eyes. He knows. David nodded, his gaze burning with anger. The Mission District buzzed. Leaked news of the interrogation hit the press. Suspect in 2003 case questioned. Statements contradictory. Residents felt relief that justice might be near, yet chilled that the killer could have walked among them for years in the lively neighborhood. As Anthony Morales left the interrogation room, shaken, the cold case unit team had no doubt he was the focus. But to end nearly 20 years of waiting, They needed undeniable proof. In the following days, the forensic lab rushed to compare DNA from Morales's family members with the male DNA under Melissa's nails. The results were chillingly clear, a perfect genetic match for a sibling only Anthony Morales fit. When Laura received the printed results, she sat silently for minutes, then whispered, "We've got him." From this, the police reconstructed the June 14, 2003 timeline, a puzzle of darkness for 2 decades. At 8:30 p.m., Melissa left her Mission District apartment for friends on Valencia Street, her phone soon going dead. That same time, work logs showed Morales ending his shift at the building across from hers. Witnesses reported seeing a tall, lanky man in a denim jacket near the parking lot gate around 9 o'clock. By 9:15, a neighbor heard arguing from the hallway, a faint female voice saying, "Don't touch me." Those could have been Melissa's final moments alive. Tracing old data, the team found a traffic camera on Market Street capturing a small gray pickup heading toward Golden Gate Park at 10 p.m. that night. Though the image was grainy, a partial license plate matched a vehicle registered to Morales. It all aligned. He was at the scene, had no solid alibi, and fled San Francisco weeks later. Laura and her team spread out charts, connecting arrows from witness statements, cameras, work logs, to DNA evidence. The board filled with red threads, all converging on one name, Anthony Morales. In the quiet room, the sound of a marker on the file rang clear, like hammer strikes on the case's final door. Outside, San Francisco buzzed with cars crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, neon lights glowing on Valencia Street. But for those following the case, the air was heavy.
And the Carter family was briefed on the DNA results.
Linda gripped David's hand, tears falling. "I always knew someone took her. Now, finally, we have answers." David stood beside her, face pained yet resolute, swallowing 2 decades of rage. In the cold case unit office, Laura stood silently before the investigation board. The curtain was about to lift, the truth once buried, emerging layer by layer. A nearly 20-year game was nearing its end, but for her, it wasn't a sense of victory, but breathless anticipation. The real work was just beginning. The net was tightening, and there was no escape for Anthony Morales. In February 2023, Daly City was still cloaked in thin morning fog when unmarked SFPD vehicles quietly lined a peaceful street. Residents had no idea that just a few houses away, a murder suspect had lived calmly for 2 decades. Anthony Morales, now 48, rented a modest second-floor apartment, returning from work in the afternoons, shopping at the local supermarket, chatting casually with neighbors as if he were just an ordinary laborer. But to the task force stationed below, he was the center of a murder case that shook San Francisco since 2003. 6:30 a.m., the signal was given, the wooden door was forced open, shouts of "police, search warrant," echoing through the hallway. Morales jolted from his makeshift bed, barely grasping the situation as guns were aimed at him. He raised his hands, stumbling back, stammering, "What's going on? I didn't do anything." But there was no room for excuses. Cold handcuffs snapped shut on his wrists, and within minutes, the man who evaded justice for nearly 20 years was escorted down the stairs under the stunned gazes of neighbors. An elderly woman, a downstairs neighbor, stood frozen at her door, whispering, "My God, he lived right here, next to us all these years." News helicopters buzzed overhead as the story spread rapidly. Local stations interrupted morning programs to broadcast live footage. A graying man in a rumpled t-shirt led to a police car amid a swarm of cameras. Red text scrolled across screens. Breaking news, suspect arrested in 2003 San Francisco cold case. In the Carter family's San Francisco living room, Linda wept upon seeing the image on TV. She covered her mouth, trembling. "That's him, the one who took my daughter." David sat beside her, fists clenched, eyes glued to the screen. 2 decades of anguish, from despair to faint hope, culminated in this moment. The killer was finally brought to light. Meanwhile, in Daly City, reporters and residents crowded the street. Many were shocked to learn Tony, the guy who fixed cars in the communal garage, who offered neighbors a beer, was accused of murder. "It's unbelievable," a middle-aged man told the press. "We thought he was harmless, just lonely. No one imagined he hid such a horrific secret." Anthony Morales was taken to SFPD headquarters under tight security. Cameras swarmed, flashbulbs popping chaotically. The media reported minute by minute, calling it one of the most shocking arrests in San Francisco's recent history. For the community, the shock wasn't just the exposed crime, but the realization that the killer had lived among them, walked the same streets, shopped at the same stores for nearly 20 years. In a brief afternoon press conference, the SFPD spokesperson declared, "Today, thanks to advanced DNA technology and the tireless efforts of the Cold Case Unit, we have arrested Anthony Morales, the primary suspect in the 2003 murder of Melissa Carter." The room fell silent for seconds before cameras clicked in unison. In the Mission District, where Melissa once lived, old friends gathered outside the Valencia Street bar, placing flowers and candles beneath her old photo. One friend, choked with emotion, said, "Melissa was always punctual, always cheerful. No one deserved to vanish like that. We've waited 20 years for this day." Candlelight flickered in the San Francisco night, a reminder that justice was finally speaking. In a San Francisco Superior Court meeting room, the rustle of papers mixed with urgent discussions. Just weeks after Anthony Morales' arrest, the district attorney's office began preparing for one of the most anticipated trials in years. On the table, thick files stacked high, forensic reports, crime scene maps, photos of remains, witness statements, and DNA results. Chief Prosecutor Rachel Nguyen led the case. She knew the city's eyes were on them, and any misstep could let justice slip away again. Cold Case Unit investigators, led by Detective Laura Wilson, were summoned to provide all materials related to tracing the DNA and reconstructing the June 14, 2003 timeline. Forensic police prepared slides showing fractured ribs, knife marks on bone, and the male DNA under Melissa's nails. These would pin Morales to the scene, leaving no room for denial. Concurrently, prosecutors recalled past witnesses. The neighbor who heard arguing in the hallway was brought in to reaffirm her statement. Another witness, a student at the time, who saw a man in a denim jacket near the parking lot gate, was added to the list. They sat at the table, signing with trembling hands, many admitting the disappearance had haunted them for 20 years. The Carter family was prepared for the tough days ahead. Linda Carter, now in her 70s, sat in her small living room with blank paper before her. A witness liaison guided her to write her statement, the last moment she heard her daughter's voice over the phone, the long nights awaiting news, and the torment of keeping Melissa's room untouched for 2 decades. Linda wrote each word, tears staining the paper. "I want the jury to understand, Melissa wasn't just a name in a file, she was my daughter, my whole life," she said, voice breaking. David Carter, Melissa's brother, prepared his testimony with a firmer tone. He would recount the outrage when police initially dismissed the disappearance, leaving the family in darkness for 20 years. He rehearsed in front of a mirror, fists clenched. "I'll tell the courtroom we never gave up, and this killer took not just a loved one, but our faith in justice." Meanwhile, Morales' defense team began strategizing. Leaked reports suggested they'd focus on denying a direct link between Morales and Melissa, claiming his maintenance job at the building was coincidental. But prosecutors anticipated this, ready with neighbor statements, traffic camera footage, and crucially, genetic genealogy results. The atmosphere in the DA's office those days was thick with tension. The media, impatient, had reporters camped outside the courthouse, covering every move. Headlines ran, "San Francisco prepares for historic trial. Victim's family after 20 years, justice nears." The community held its breath. In a final meeting before the preliminary hearing, Rachel Nguyen concluded firmly, "We will prove to the jury that Anthony Morales is no longer a suspect. He is a murderer." Everyone nodded, eyes united. They knew the biggest challenge lay ahead, but the pieces fit, and the final picture was about to be revealed. In Melissa's old Mission District apartment, her friends lit candles each night. They vowed to attend the trial, sitting in the gallery to witness justice speak. In that flickering candlelight, San Francisco knew the city faced a trial, not just of a man, but of the darkness that had shrouded the community for 20 years. On the opening day of the trial at San Francisco Superior Court, the courtroom was packed, not a seat empty. Cold white light shone on the jury, Reporters crowded the back rows, and the Carter family sat quietly in the front, just meters from the man accused of destroying their lives. Anthony Morales, in an orange jumpsuit, gray hair disheveled, hands still marked by cuffs, tried to maintain a calm face, but his eyes darted, avoiding the victim's family. Chief Prosecutor Rachel Nguyen stood, her voice firm yet grave. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court, today we will prove that Anthony Morales murdered Melissa Carter on the night of June 14, 2003. We have undeniable DNA evidence, direct witnesses, and a logical chain of events showing he deliberately hid his crime for 20 years. She faced the jury, holding up a file. Under Melissa's fingernails, we found male DNA. Genetic genealogy pinpointed the killer, and the results match Anthony Morales. Behind her, Linda Carter covered her mouth, tears streaming. David sat beside her, face etched with rage, eyes fixed on the defendant. The prosecution called its first witness, a man who lived in Melissa's building in 2003. He took the stand, voice trembling. "I remember that night, just after 9, I heard arguing in the hallway. A female voice cried, 'Don't touch me,' panic. Peeking through my door, I saw a tall, lanky man in a faded denim jacket. That image haunted me for years." He paused, taking a deep breath. "When police showed me Morales's photo, I knew it was the man I saw." Morales's defense attorney quickly countered in cross-examination. "Are you sure your memory is accurate? 20 years have passed. Human memory isn't perfect." The witness shook his head. "Some things you don't forget. That scream, that face, they stayed with me every day." The prosecution called another witness, a former student, who saw a man near the parking lot gate that night. "I didn't hear much, but I saw him standing close to a dark-haired woman. I didn't think much of it then, but when Melissa vanished, I knew I'd seen her final moment." When presenting scientific evidence, the room fell into tense silence. On a large screen, a forensic expert displayed images of fractured ribs, knife marks on bone, and analyzed DNA sequences. Under the victim's nails was male DNA. It didn't match CODIS, but through genetic genealogy, we traced the Morales family, and direct comparison showed a complete match. His voice was firm. "No one but Anthony Morales." The defense attorney stood, facing the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution paints a simple picture, but the truth is more complex. DNA under the nails doesn't necessarily prove a violent attack. It could come from intimate contact. We'll show Morales and Carter may have had a consensual relationship. No direct witness saw Morales harm Carter." He turned to Morales. "My client doesn't deny knowing Carter, but denies killing her." The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously. Linda Carter gasped, shaking her head, while David growled, "Don't smear my sister." The judge banged the gavel, calling for order. The prosecution fired back. "A consensual relationship doesn't lead to broken ribs, knife marks on bone, or a woman vanishing for 2 decades. What we have is evidence of a struggle, a cold-blooded murder, not a relationship." Rachel faced the defendant, voice heavy with emotion, and he, sitting there, caused it all. The courtroom's atmosphere was thick. Melissa's old friends in the gallery clutched each other's hands. They'd waited 20 years for this, but hearing the defense twist Melissa's death into a consensual relationship felt like salt in a wound. The first day of the trial ended in peak tension. Headlines screamed, "Prosecution presents DNA evidence. Defense counters with relationship claim." But for the Carter family, all that remained after the long mourning was indescribable pain. Their daughter and sister, once again dragged into public dispute, when all they wanted was one truth, that she was a victim, not a character in the story. The killer and his lawyer tried to distort. On the third day of the trial, the courtroom's air was as thick as the fog over San Francisco Bay. After the prosecution presented undeniable DNA evidence and old witnesses confirmed seeing Melissa in a tense argument, they called a new face to the stand, Evelyn Moore, 62, a former neighbor of both Melissa Carter and Anthony Morales at the Valencia Street Apartments in 2003. She walked slowly but with blazing eyes, carrying memories she'd held for 2 decades. Evelyn began, her voice hoarse but firm. "I remember that night, June 14th, I couldn't sleep. Around 11 p.m., I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. I peeked out and saw Morales returning. What struck me was his old denim jacket, sleeves wet, face sweaty, walking hurriedly like he'd been through something. She paused, breathing deeply. Normally, Morales was back by 9, but that night, he was much later, looking stressed. Prosecutor Rachel Nowen pressed, "Did you see him carrying anything unusual?" Evelyn nodded. He had a dark fabric bag, stuffed so tightly, it looked like he was hiding something. I didn't know what it meant then, but when Melissa vanished days later, I suspected. The courtroom was silent. All eyes turned to Morales. He sat in the defendant's chair, face cold, but his fingers nervously scratched the wooden table before him. Rachel continued, "Did you report this to the police in 2003? Evelyn lowered her head, voice soft. "I did, but they said it wasn't enough evidence, and the case went cold. I've carried that guilt until today." As Evelyn left the stand, the prosecution displayed DNA comparison results on the screen. The time Morales was seen returning, around 11 p.m., matched the forensic estimate of Melissa's death based on bone and tissue conditions. The new witness testimony and scientific evidence locked together like the final pieces of the puzzle. The defense attorney stood, trying to sow doubt. "Miss Moore, it's been 20 years. Can your memory be that precise? Could you have mixed up dates or people?" Evelyn raised her head. "I may forget many things, but not that night. I lived steps from his door, and I looked straight at his face as he passed. I'll never forget that skulking figure." The courtroom murmured. The jury scribbled notes, some nodding. For them, the resolve of a neighbor who directly witnessed suspicious behavior, combined with forensic data, was powerful proof that Anthony Morales had lied all along. The Carter family sat in front, eyes teary. Linda whispered to David, "See, the pieces are falling into place. Justice is coming." David nodded, eyes red but bright. After 20 years of patient waiting, they felt the lamp of hope reignite. In a brief press conference afterward, Rachel Nowen spoke succinctly but powerfully. When science and human memory align, the truth can no longer be denied. Her words became the next morning's headline. Outside the courthouse, Mission District residents gathered, many bringing flowers and Melissa's photos. An old friend spoke through tears. "We knew she was a victim, and now it's clearer than ever. This community won't forget Melissa, nor forgive who did this." In solitary confinement, Morales sat silent, no longer protesting. Overlapping testimonies, DNA evidence, precise timelines, and now a living witness. The net around him tightened. There was no escape, only the wait for the final verdict. For the Carter family, for the first time in 20 years, they believed justice was truly near. The courtroom was packed that morning, not a seat empty. The day for closing arguments had arrived, the tension like a taut string about to snap. The Carter family sat in front, Linda clutching David's hand, both with red eyes but resolute. Defendant Anthony Morales sat opposite, eyes sunken, face rigid, as if the calm facade he'd built throughout the trial was cracking. Chief Prosecutor Rachel Nowen took the podium, her voice ringing, sharp yet emotional. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we've heard many testimonies, seen much evidence, but one detail stands out: the male DNA under Melissa Carter's fingernails. This isn't a random trace, it's proof of a struggle, evidence that Melissa fought for her life." She held up an enlarged photo of the test results. No one but Anthony Morales left this trace. Not a stranger, not a vague theory, but him, sitting in this courtroom. She paused, facing the jury. "Remember the broken ribs, the knife marks on bone, all pointing to a brutal attack. No one willingly walks into such a scene. No one consents to be killed. Melissa Carter was a strong woman who fought to her last breath. The DNA under her nails is her final voice, begging us to hear and bring her justice." In the courtroom, Linda Carter sobbed, David gripping her shoulder. Many of Melissa's old friends bowed their heads, unable to hold back tears. The room seemed to sink in muffled sobs. When it was their turn, Morales's defense attorney stood, voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we can't ignore the possibility that Morales and Carter had a private relationship. DNA could come from intimate contact, not necessarily violence. No direct witness saw Morales harm Carter, and don't forget, 20-year-old memories aren't perfectly reliable." He turned to Morales, My client doesn't deny knowing Carter, but denies killing her. The words rang out but lacked weight. The entire chain of evidence, Morales' sudden departure after 2003, witness accounts of the lanky figure in the hallway, the pickup near Golden Gate Park, and now the DNA, all pointed to one conclusion. Rachel returned, concluding firmly, for 20 years, the Carter family has lived in darkness, awaiting answers. Today, you have the chance to bring light. Listen to the evidence, to science, to Melissa Carter herself. I ask you to deliver a verdict. Guilty. The courtroom was still. No one moved. No one breathed loudly. The jury of 12 sat silently, faces tense. The judge banged the gavel, announcing, "The jury will retire to deliberate." As the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in a chaotic symphony. The click of cameras, the whispers of reporters, Linda's sobs, and the murmurs of onlookers. But in the jury's section, not a word was spoken. They rose, their steps heavy, filing into the deliberation room, carrying the weighty responsibility of deciding Anthony Morales' fate and delivering final justice for Melissa Carter. Linda Carter leaned into her son's shoulder, choking out, "She's waited for this day too long." David gripped his mother's hand, eyes fixed on the door the jury had entered. Inside him, tension surged to its peak. Everyone understood. A long chapter of darkness was about to close, but if the verdict wasn't as hoped, the pain could linger forever. On the morning of the verdict, the San Francisco courthouse was packed. Reporters jostled on the steps leading to the courtroom, cameras and microphones raised high. Inside, the air was thick, silent enough to hear pages turning. The Carter family sat in the front row, Linda clutching David's hand, her eyes red from sleepless nights. After nearly 2 decades, this moment was the final door of a long, painful journey. Anthony Morales entered, in an orange jumpsuit, face taut, eyes coldly fixed on the floor, avoiding all gazes. The judge banged the gavel, voice solemn. The jury has reached a verdict after deliberation. Everyone stood. The air seemed to freeze. The jury foreperson rose, paper in hand, reading slowly. On the charge of first-degree murder of Melissa Carter, we find the defendant Anthony Morales guilty. Whispers rippled through the room. Linda burst into tears, shoulders shaking. David hugged her tightly, tears streaming but eyes blazing with relief. Melissa's old friends in the back rows sobbed, clutching hands, whispering, "Finally, finally, justice has come." The judge continued, voice firm, "Given the severity of the crime and the defendant's deliberate concealment for nearly 20 years, this court sentences Anthony Morales to life imprisonment without parole." The words rang like a bell, closing a long era of darkness. Morales bowed his head, face pale, lips pursed. He offered no resistance, no excuses. 2 officers escorted him up, handcuffs clinking. He glanced around briefly, eyes vacant, then was led away amid the courtroom's ceaseless hum. The media broadcast live, red text scrolling. Anthony Morales, sentenced to life without parole in 2003 Melissa Carter murder. San Francisco seemed to pause for a collective breath, then erupted in conversations, special reports, and tearful online comments. 20 years was too long, but justice has finally prevailed, a TV commentator said. For the Carter family, it wasn't joy but release. Linda wept in her son's arms, choking out, "Melissa can rest now, she's no longer left in the dark." David bowed his head, eyes red, whispering, "We did it, sis. Justice called your name." Outside the courthouse, the Mission District community gathered, many bringing candles and flowers. They lit up Valencia Street, where Melissa once laughed with friends 20 years ago. The flickering candles were like countless watching eyes, a belated but complete farewell. An old friend of Melissa's spoke through tears to a camera. "Justice came late, but it came. No one can give us Melissa back, but at least now we know the truth." As night fell over San Francisco, the city echoed with the historic verdict's aftermath. The Carter family returned home, clutching Melissa's framed photo, hearts both aching and at peace. 20 years from disappearance, to search, to cold case, to this moment, ended with a life sentence for the killer. Justice was late, but in that courtroom, it proved the truth could be buried but never extinguished. When Anthony Morales' life sentence without parole was announced, San Francisco reeled. In the days that followed, newspapers overflowed with analyses, commentary, and TV specials. The San Francisco Chronicle's front page blared, 20 years in darkness, late justice for Melissa Carter. The article detailed the initial 2003 investigation's failures. Police overlooked a neighbor's key testimony about a hallway argument, failed to thoroughly investigate the building maintenance worker, Morales, despite his living across from the victim, and assumed the disappearance might be an adult leaving voluntarily. These missteps, coupled with limited DNA technology at the time, let the case languish in the cold case files for nearly 2 decades. Local TV stations hosted panels with forensic experts, veteran investigators, and cold case unit representatives. Detective Laura Wilson appeared on screen, stating firmly, "Without modern genetic genealogy, we couldn't have proven the truth. But we must admit, this case didn't need to take 20 years. We must learn to listen to witnesses, value every clue, because in crime, no detail is meaningless." In the Mission District, the shock ran deeper. Residents were stunned to realize the killer had lived among them, shopping at their stores, chatting casually, or standing smoking on a balcony. An old neighbor told the press, "We thought he was a quiet, decent guy. No one imagined he carried such a horrific secret." Many felt haunted, as if the familiar walls of their neighborhood had shattered, revealing long-hidden darkness. Memorials for Melissa Carter continued. Old friends and colleagues laid flowers and lit candles on Valencia Street, where she'd planned to meet friends that fateful night. They shared memories of a cheerful, dedicated woman, always punctual and reliable. A former colleague choked out, "We lost her too soon, and it took 20 years for the truth." This reminds us that behind every missing person case is a real person, a real life. National media joined in. CNN ran a feature titled, "DNA Technology and the Power of Persistence: Lessons from the Melissa Carter Case." It retraced the investigation from the first missing person posters to the courtroom verdict. The report emphasized only through advances in genetic technology and the cold case unit's persistence did justice prevail. Science may arrive late, but it arrives with absolute precision, a commentator said, giving answers to families who thought they'd live forever in darkness. For the Carter family, the verdict's ripples didn't stop. Linda, though, relieved her daughter received justice, lived with the haunting realization she'd slept under the same sky as the killer, unaware. David shared on TV, "This verdict doesn't bring joy. It lets us exhale after 20 years of holding our breath. But the wound remains, and it will never fully heal." In an editorial, the Los Angeles Times wrote, "The Melissa Carter case is not just a family's tragedy, but a mirror for society. It shows the importance of DNA technology in solving old cases, but also reminds us that justice only comes when we confront mistakes and fix systemic flaws." As San Francisco moved into spring 2023, Melissa Carter's name remained a cautionary tale. Law schools and forensic conferences cited the case as an example. The cold case unit received a flood of requests to review other files, hoping new technology could bring answers. But in the heart of the Mission District, where neon lights still glowed on Valencia Street's familiar corners, the heavy aftermath lingered. A killer had lived among them for 2 decades, hidden behind a normal facade, and a woman vanished one summer night in 2003, leaving an indelible mark of loss. The case's end wasn't joy, but a profound message. DNA technology can bring light to darkness, but the pain of cold cases leaves lasting scars. Justice, though late, must come to answer for those lost and to reassure the living that the truth, ultimately, cannot stay buried forever. The story of Melissa Carter's case is not just a cold crime report, but a reflection of real issues in American society today. The police's initial dismissal, the prolonged pain of victims' families, and the power of science when applied at the right time. In 2003, police assumed Melissa's disappearance was an adult leaving voluntarily, ignoring a neighbor's testimony of a hallway argument, and failing to closely investigate Morales, the maintenance worker living across from her apartment. That mistake left the case cold for nearly 2 decades, with the Carter family in darkness, keeping her empty room untouched and lighting candles in wait. Only when DNA and genetic genealogy were applied did the tiny cell sample under Melissa's nails, evidence she left in her final moments, become a liberating voice, unmasking a killer living among the community. The lesson for American society today is clear: no sign of danger, especially in missing person cases, should be dismissed. Families and communities must persistently pressure the system to not overlook clues, and authorities must treat every disappearance with utmost seriousness, as a single detail could be the key to saving a life or delivering justice years later. It also underscores the value of investing in modern forensic technology, because through DNA, the truth could no longer hide. For all of us, Melissa Carter's story reminds us that justice may come late, but faith, persistence, and the community's voice can keep the lamp of hope burning. Thank you for joining us on this journey to justice for Melissa Carter after nearly 20 years in darkness. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more cold case stories where the truth always finds a way back, and we'll see you in the next video.